Hey y'all, my name is Melissa. I write the blog Melly Sews and I design blank slate patterns. I'm also the author of the book Sundressing. And today we're going to be sewing up my favorite purse. This purse is my favorite because it has lots of pockets. There are exterior pockets, there are interior pockets. Anything you want to put in a place, it's got a pocket to put it. So I am looking forward to sewing with you, and I hope you enjoy sewing with me. I want to show you first that we can see on this one here that's got this exterior welt pocket, and this is the reverse side of the purse here where it's just got the exterior bag pocket. So it's a nice balance between things that you need to hold securely and zippered and things like maybe your sunglasses that you just want to throw in the outside pocket. And then let's take a peek inside this bag. I've also got these side pockets here. These are great for things like your phone that you want to keep within easy reach but under a zipper. And then for the most secure things, there's an interior zipper pocket as well. So if you refer to the pattern for this, the first thing is going to be sewing all those pockets. Let's talk about materials a little bit. This purse is entirely made with materials I bought at the fabric store. And this cotton webbing or cotton belting, that's available at certain stores, not all stores. Some of them you'll find nylon belting instead of cotton, which is perfectly acceptable to use. I just feel the cotton feels a little better on your shoulder. And then these rectangular rings and this slider bar are all things you can purchase at the fabric store as well. When you buy at the fabric store, the slider bars come in a lot of different finishes, so you can pick which one will coordinate best with your belting and your fabric. But another fun way to gather materials for this project is actually to visit the thrift store. And I went and picked up this assortment of belts. If you look for these woven belts, a lot of times they come like with a pair of pants and then people don't want them. So they just get taken to the thrift store. You can pick them up really cheaply. And a lot of times they are better quality, thicker metal, and more finishes than what you can find at the fabric store. So if you take a look, you can find interesting things like this raffia belting, or these are both cotton belting, but they have the stripes and things that you might not find at the fabric store. This one even already has the slider attached to it, so I wouldn't need to attach the slider bar at all to this one. You can also get the D-rings or the rectangular rings, whatever you would like to use to attach the strap to the purse. You can cut these right off of a belt and then not even use the belt, just use the hardware that it came with. It's a really fun, if you like treasure hunting, it's a really fun way to go find pieces to use in a purse. You can also cut hardware off old purses from the thrift store too. So that's another option you can look at. So as I said, the favorite purse here has all these exterior pockets, and that would be the first step. We'd sew these welt pockets according to the pattern instructions. We'd sew these interior pockets to the lining according to the pattern instructions. And that would then get us to the step where we're ready to attach the zipper. So that's where we are with this sample here. We're just going to pretend that all the pockets have been sewn onto these pieces. And I've got the lovely purple zipper here so that you can see exactly what we're doing. I've got my two main purse pieces. This is the outer fabric. And I've got my two main lining pieces. So this is the lining fabric that we're going to do. And to attach the zipper, what you're going to do is you're going to take the zipper and you're going to put it face down, right sides together with one of the outer purse pieces. And you want to go ahead and we're going to add just a couple pins to hold that in place. Make sure it's laying nice and flat. And then you need to sandwich this between that outer purse piece and the lining piece. So I'm going to make sure that all of those raw edges are lined up, the zipper, the lining, and the outer purse. I'm going to use a few more pins to make sure that we are holding this in place. And then what we're going to do, once we've got this securely pinned, we're going to stitch right along this edge. We're going to stop about an inch from each edge here that we're not going to sew that last little bit. Now when we stitch this, we're going to need a zipper foot on the machine. This is an example here of what a zipper foot looks like. You might have one that looks like this or one that looks like this. The only difference between them, on this one you'll see that there's a hole in the center of the foot that the needle can go through in the center position, and then you can also move the needle to either of the side positions. That's so that you can get the needle right next to the zipper teeth with the foot on the fabric on the other side. With this type, it doesn't have that hole in the center, so you typically will insert it on one side or the other of the needle when you snap it into the shank. So this is the one that actually belongs with this machine, and we're just going to take off the regular presser foot and then snap in the zipper foot, and we're going to make sure to set the needle to the side that we need it so that the needle will hit between the zipper teeth and the foot. I'm going to start about an inch in, and I can feel with my fingers here where the zipper teeth are. So I want to make sure that I'm to the other side of that, and then we're just going to stitch. As you stitch, make sure that you are keeping the zipper tape and the two fabrics lined up. Make sure also to stop again about an inch from this edge. And then what we need to do, and this is so that the zipper will be free from the edges when we finish constructing the purse, we're going to unzip it slightly. And then we're going to pull the zipper tape back away from that raw edge, but we want to continue sewing the two fabrics together. So I'm going to keep the tape away so it doesn't go in the seam anymore. And I'm going to sew the two fabrics only. Again, this is one of those things you can open the fabric and you can look in to make sure, or you can go operate a lot by feel as to where exactly that zipper tape ends. So I've backed up a little bit from where I stitched previously. And you can see now that the zipper is out on that last part. That's going to be important when we sew up the sides of the bag here. We don't want the zipper caught in that. We're going to do the same thing at the beginning of the zipper, where we're going to pull the zipper out of the way and place the fabric together and then finish stitching that seam so that the zipper is not in it. So I've got the right side of the zipper facing the outside of my bag. The wrong side of the zipper is facing the inside of my bag. I'm going to put the two fabrics wrong sides together, and then I am going to repeat this process with the other side of the bag. I want to make sure that the right side of the fabric is facing the right side of the zipper again, so that the zipper is on the outer fabric. And this time, actually, instead of just pins, I'm going to use these clips. These are another type of gadget that you can use to hold things in place that sometimes are easier than pins, and they're really great when you don't want pin holes. For example, if you wanted to sew this bag out of vinyl or pleather or even thin leather, you would want to use clips so that you didn't end up with pinholes in that type of fabric, because vinyl, pleather, leather, all of those things, once you make a hole in it, that hole stays. So you don't want to use pins on those types of fabrics. Since we're using woven canvas and cotton here, it's fine to use the pins, but it's also fun to use the clips. So I've got this in place now, and the zipper is again sandwiched between my outer and inner fabrics, and again I would go and stitch, leaving those edges about 1 inch from the ends open, and then moving the zipper tape out of the way so that it is not attached at the very ends. After you've completed this step, the zipper would look more like this. So as you can see, I've got the 2 outer pieces of fabric. These are the ones we were sewing. And then if I flip it to the inside, here's the back side of the zipper with the 2 lining pieces of fabric. Now remember, these lining pieces of fabric on the actual purse would have your interior pockets sewn on them already. On the outside here, the next step after sewing in that zipper is going to be to pin the pleats on these outer bag pockets, and then you would apply the bias tape. You refer to the pattern instructions to do this, and then place the outer pockets on the purse pieces, and I've basted all the way around the curve here to hold these together. That's because once these are basted together, we're going to need to install the gusset. And you can see the gusset here on this purse. It keeps the bag, it gives it some room, and keeps it from just being basically a pancake that then bulges out in the middle. This gives it some room in the bottom of the bag to expand. To sew on the gusset, the first thing we need to do is to determine where the center of the gusset is. So that's really easy, to just fold in half, and you can finger press that, or you can mark that with a pin so that you know where the center is. And you are going to want both edges, the centers determined. You need to also find the center of the outer part only of the purse. This is just my 2 outer fabrics, not my lining fabric. So it's the same thing. You can fold this in half, and you can see exactly where the center is, which should be right in between those 2 pleats. So we'll mark that as the center. And we'll start by pinning the gusset to one side. So I'm matching my pins here. And then I'm going to pin all the way around this curved edge up to the edge of the gusset. Now, if you were tired of bag making at this point and you just wanted to hurry and finish, there's no reason you couldn't skip the gusset. But like I said, you would end up with a little bit of a pancake looking bag, which depending on what you want to carry in it might work. I just like to add this extra depth to the bag. So I've got that side of the gusset pinned up, and we will pin around the other side. And I am pinning through both layers of the outer pocket and the main purse fabric here, but I am not pinning to the lining. Again, you want to make sure that all your lining pieces are out of the way. They get their own gusset. If you're careful to just match up the raw edges with the raw edges of the gusset, then it will start to curve around in a nice shape. The last check you want to make, even if you started at center, you just want to make sure that you've extended the same height. So again, fold it in half, and you can make sure that your gussets are both ending at the same place. If you got off track a little bit and one's higher than the other, you're going to want to correct that in the pinning phase. Otherwise, when your purse is completed, you'll have one gusset that comes up to here and one that's like down here, and it'll look off balance. So once that's pinned, we're just going to switch back to the regular presser foot. We will put our needle back in the center. and then we are going to sew that gusset in place. Now I'm using about a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. And just very carefully move as you go around the curves, move the excess fabric out of the way so that you don't end up with a pucker while you're sewing this gusset on. You want to make sure that whatever is passing under your needle is laying really flat. Okay, so we've got the gusset sewn in place on that edge, and what we need to do next is pin and sew it in place on the other edge. I can still see my fold where I finger pressed the center mark, but I'm going to mark that with a pin here. And then in between my pleats in the center here, to make sure that I'm matching up the centers again. So we're pinning this gusset in place the exact same way we did the other one, just keeping those raw edges aligned. So the story of this purse actually is I had one that was very similar to this that I had purchased, and I carried it until it fell apart, like literally fell apart. And that was what inspired me to create the pattern to make this my favorite purse, because it really was my favorite purse. And this way I can have as many variations and as many fabrics as I want, and they all have all of those great pockets to keep organized. All right, got that side of the gusset pinned. We'll do the other side. And then just like before, we're going to stitch just the gusset part to the purse. And then we will be folding it to sew up the side edges of the outer purse. This is where it really starts to take shape. So using that 1/4 inch seam allowance again. Don't tell the sewing police that I'm sewing over pins. Okay, once we have both sides of the gusset sewn onto the outer fabric, you can see how this has created the bottom edge of the purse, but we're still open right here. So what we need to do now is we need to sew these side seams. We're going to stop about a 1/2 inch below the level of the zipper here. because we're going to need to add these side tabs. So we do need this seam sewn up before we can sew this piece on. When you are pinning this part, it's really important to make sure that your bias tape edges from the outer pockets line up with each other. This is not a place where you want one way higher than the other. And if they're not perfectly in line, this is where you have a little bit of play there in the gusset that you can kind of scooch one edge down or the other edge down just a millimeter or two if you need to get those to line up. So I'm making sure that my bias tape is lined up first and foremost. I'm making sure my zipper tape is out of the way next. And I'm going to pin, and this is where we will stop. Right about there. And then I am going to go with that edge. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Ooh, see how my bias tape is way off there? We can sort of scooch it around on the gusset side to make sure that that evens up. This is also why the side tabs come in handy, because if you're a millimeter or two off, the side tab's going to cover that as well. You just don't want to be so far off that it's obvious once the tab is sewn on. Okay, and we'll be stopping stitching right there. So we have two quick seams we're going to sew. I'm sewing from the same stitching line as the gusset here, about a 1/2 inch back from where I ended sewing the gusset. And then ending about a 1/2 inch below the zipper. Sometimes your machine may have a little bit of trouble getting over the bulk of the bias tape pockets there. So sometimes you may need to put a hand a little bit on the back of the machine and just gently help pull it through, help those feed dogs propel it through as you sew. All right, now we're going to come back over that seam, so I'm not bothering to backstitch or anything there. So this is the reason we have not sewn the gusset to the lining yet. That is because we want to turn this bag right side out. And if you unzip it, that makes it easier. And sometimes when you turn it right side out, you might go, oh my gosh, I did something wrong because I'm seeing the wrong side of the fabric. This is just the outer pocket that didn't get turned all the way to that side. So there we go, all looks right with the world now. And what you would want to do is, while you can still keep these lining pieces out of the way, this is where you would put pin the tab over here. You're going to center the tab over the seam. So you've got an equal amount on each side, and then you'll top stitch it into place. That covers the edges of those bias tape pieces, and it's a nice decorative element when you're carrying the purse. It also reinforces that side seam there, and it reinforces the pockets so that they don't tear away from use. Once you have finished sewing those side tabs on, we got to go back to inside out purse. And we've got to sew on the lining gusset. So this is only slightly different than the process of sewing on the gusset for the outer part of the purse. On one side, it's going to be exactly the same, where you are going to have the center of the lining match up with the center of the gusset. and you're going to pin that gusset in place, and we're going to stitch it. Exact same on this side as we did on the outer gusset. Okay, let's double check real quick because I pinned very quickly to make sure that I'm still even on the ends there. That looks okay, so we'll stitch that in place. And if you were smart and you were right-handed, you would actually put your pins in this way, because then you could easily pull them without stopping your stitching. But I never remember to do that. Okay, here is where the gusset gets a little bit different on this side. We have to leave a gap in the lining to turn this purse right side out, or we will be stuck with an inside out bag that will not turn without seam ripping. So when we pin this end of the gusset, we're going to be leaving a gap right about here, and that will be where we turn the purse. And then that can either be hand stitched or machine stitched into place once the purse is right side out. So I like to leave myself a couple inches in between pins, and I'll stop at this pin and then start up again at the next one. All right, let's stitch that in place. You know what? If I don't sew with the gusset side up, I am likely to end up with puckers, so let's do this right. And just like with the outer fabric, I'm making sure that any kind of creases or bubbles, that I'm moving those out of the way with my fingers before they get sewn over. Although you don't really have to be as careful with the lining because nobody's going to see it but you. Okay, it's important to leave this open in the lining because now, right before we turn this right side out, we're going to be stitching up the sides here that are still open, and we're going to finish stitching up this part that we didn't stitch earlier. Before we do that, it's important to make sure that the zipper is out of the way, and we want to make sure that the seam edges right here are matched up with each other. So the lining is right against the lining, the outer fabric is right against the outer fabric, and we've pinned those together. And here I'm going to push the zipper to the inside of the bag so that it is out of the way. And then we're matching up the lining to the lining, the outer fabric to the outer fabric, pinning right through that seam allowance to make sure that those are matched up. So then I just need to stitch from the gussets down to my previous stitching line, and the sides of the bag will be all closed. Again, most important thing is don't catch your zipper in this step. Okay, we've got one side sewn, one side to go. We'll start down here at the gusset. I'll overlap my stitching just slightly. And then I will make sure I'm not catching my zipper in this seam. And I'm overlapping my other stitching slightly. And now it's time to turn the bag. So reach in through that hole in the gusset lining and you're going to turn the entire purse right side out. The size of the hole that you leave in the gusset needs to take into account what kind of fabric you're using. I'm using home decor canvas and cotton here. Both of those are pretty easy to bunch up and to move through this process as I turn it right side out. If, for example, I was using something like vinyl or pleather that was a lot thicker and less flexible, I would want to leave a bigger hole in the lining to accommodate turning the bag right side out. So once you get the lining all through, reach in through where you left the zipper slightly open and pull the rest of the bag out. And you can always unzip a little more. So we've got the bag here, and it's got lining hanging out the top of it. And it's got this zipper hanging out that we didn't want to sew in. So with the zipper here, we will actually be unzipping it past the edge to be able to sew in the tab on this side. And with the lining, we need to do something with that hole we just used for turning. What you'll do is you'll turn the seam allowances in toward each other, and you can either do a hand ladder stitch or a blind stitch to secure these together, or if you're in a hurry, you can also just pin these together and then sew right close to the edge and have it closed that way, because after all, this is the lining. It's really not going to be seen in the purse. Once your lining is closed, you want to push it into the bag. And then we will have a sample that looks more like this because you would have sewn your side tabs on already. So it would be pushed into the bag, and as I showed here, you unzip the zipper past the edge to be able to sew on the tabs here, and you can follow the pattern instructions there. You loop the tab through your D-ring or your rectangular ring and then stitch it in place. On this end, what you would do is you take these two zipper ends and you overlap them, and then you put the tab over the whole thing. So you want these two stops far enough apart that you can sew the tab in between them. And then that's what this would look. I like to sew in a box and then X through the middle as well to make sure that these are secured on very well. The final step, once you've got all of that in place, is going to be to sew your strap on. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this belt that already had the slider installed. If you were buying cotton belting or webbing from the store and you bought a separate slider, what you would need to do is loop that through the center bar of the slider and then stitch it in place. Once that is done, it would look just like this, like a belt. You're going to make sure that the slider is right side away from you, and you're going to take the end of the belt through one of the rings away from the purse. You're going to pull it back up to come through the slider, through both sides of it, and then bring it back down and put it in place. Let's clip it actually. Put it in place around the D-ring. We're going to go ahead and sew that, but you can see how this makes this an adjustable strap. So you can wear the bag crossbody or over one shoulder depending on how long you put the strap. This is a place where it's handy to use that zipper foot again because it'll let you get right next to the bar of the D-ring without having to get the presser foot on it, because if the presser foot is on that D-ring, it's going to make the sewing machine kind of uneven and unbalanced, and it'll stop feeding through the sewing machine. So switch to that zipper foot, and actually, since this one has the center hole in it, I'm not going to move the needle at all. I'm just going to check to make sure that the needle does indeed go through the hole. It's always good to check with a zipper foot before you start stitching, because this is a really easy way to forget, break a needle, and end up with a needle shooting back at you. So got that in place, and we will just stitch right across. And we're going to reverse stitch right back across that to make sure this is really secure. And I actually like to do that a few times, so we'll go back once more. Once we cut the thread, then we've got our favorite purse ready to go. You've got the adjustable strap. We've done the zipper. We've gotten all the interior pockets. It's got this great gusset on the bottom so it doesn't just lay flat. The pleats here actually mean that this outer pocket can hold more than the inner purse can, and it should be able to store just about anything you want to take with you. Thank you for joining me today. I've enjoyed sewing with you, and I hope you've enjoyed sewing with me.